Today we're going to talk about English brown ale. What is it? Well, currently it's basically dead. There's virtually no examples of brown ale brewed apart from Newcastle brown ale, which is incredibly atypical and not even really brown, and Man's brown ale, which we'll discuss quite a bit now, because that's the Man's brewery behind me, by the way, and that's where the first modern brown ale was brewed. I think around 1900 or just after. Brown ale has a remarkably short history, at least the modern form of it. Brown ale existed in the 18th century, and that was when, yeah, it was the ale equivalent of porter, basically. So, an ale brewed from brown malt, um, and wasn't hugely popular, I don't think. You don't come across it that much, but it was something that existed. But it disappeared at the end of the 18th century, start of the 19th century, when everyone goes over to using pale malt as a base, just because it was cheaper. And so then you see basically all dark beers disappear, and the only ones that remain are porter and stout, and everything else is pale. Mild's pale, old ale's pale, pale ales obviously are pale. So there's no brown ale at all for the whole of the 19th century, or pretty much the whole of the 19th century. There might have been some odd ones at the start in some obscure places, but basically it didn't exist in the 19th century. Man's reinvented it at the start of the 20th century, and before World War One, there aren't very many examples brewed. Um, about the only one I know about is Man's. I think there probably were some other breweries who made one. It becomes very popular after World War One, generally with the growth in popularity of bottled beer, whose sales go greatly up. This was partly, I think, because of the dodgy quality of draft beer. Um, when brewers and publicans were struggling with the drop in gravity and were often coming up with beer that wasn't very great. And it basically took them the whole of the 20s and 30s to perfect how to make lower gravity cask beer and have it taste nice and have it not go off quickly. Um, so brown ale became popular because people were a bit dubious about the quality of draft beer. And yeah, they would drink brown ale mixed with mild because they couldn't afford to drink all bottled beer, and they wanted something where the quality was guaranteed, and also so the with bottled beer the landlord couldn't have been fiddling with it down in the cellar, which was definitely the case with some beers. Now these are the original Mans. I don't know how strong that was. I only have records from the 20s. They're the earliest ones. And then it was in the mid 1040s. So slightly stronger than the average, which was about 1042 at the time. And this is what you see in London. Most of the brown ales that are brewed in the 20s and 30s are in the mid 1040s, or even in the case of Whitbread double brown, over 1050. Now, from the beers of this type that I know, which are the Whitbread and the Barclay Perkins ones, they had their own specific grists. They weren't just versions of anything else. Um, the Barclay Perkins one that looked like very much like the Burton ales. The Whitbread Double Brown had more like a pale ale grist, but with some darker stuff added in to colour it. So these were quite different from what brown ale later became, which is basically just bottled mild. So for most breweries, their brown ale does not show up in the brewing records at all because it wasn't being made as a separate beer. It was just their mild ale that might have some different primings added to it or something like that, but it wasn't a separate brew. And so looking through the brewing records, you'd think that brown ale was an incredibly obscure type of beer because it virtually never appears, even though I know that it was actually incredibly popular and lots of it was brewed and lots of it was drunk. Um, After World War II, the gravities absolutely crash at brown ale, worse than most other beer types, to be honest. So the London ones go from being in the mid 1040s to being about 1030. Um, and you still have the occasional stronger one. Whitbread Double Brown continued a bit into the 50s, and then they discontinued it and just carried on with Forest Brown, which was their other one, which was basically just a version of their best mild ale. And so, yeah, brown ale became this very watery, sweet stuff. And in the 60s, starts going out of fashion. and goes out of fashion incredibly quickly. I think partly because people stopped drinking it mixed with mild, also because mild became incredibly unpopular. And so nowadays there's only a handful of brown ales brewed, the what I would call the classic English style. I mean, it's so obscure. Several times when I've judged competitions, I've had to point out to the other people that the style guidelines are incredibly wrong and that they don't cover the classic man's brown ale because the alcohol percentage starts at like 4.5, which is completely wrong for all English brown ales apart from Newcastle Brown and Vaux Maxim, which were incredible outliers. Um, so yeah, even the people who wrote the style guidelines don't really know what it was like. Um, and there's only a handful of examples that still exist, and and are probably not very interesting beers. I've had the man's brown ale. It's thin, watery, and sweet. It's nothing particularly exceptional. I'm vaguely amazed that it still exists, to be honest. It's currently brewed at Marston's. Um, okay, well that's it for now. I'll be back again soon with something else. This was another one that was suggested by someone, and yeah, keep the suggestions coming in, and I'll try and do them if I can. Bye bye.